Imagine for a moment, through the eyes of two young kids, their days filled with laughter and play and the comforting presence of their cross-cultural parents, a stay-at-home mom and her executive husband in the international cosmopolitan city of Shanghai. This seemingly happy family was about to be shattered in the most brutal way. On Monday, March 20th, 2017, spring had quietly arrived in Shanghai. The air was still chilly. A persistent drizzle lingered throughout the day, adding a gloomy backdrop to the events about to unfold. Around 8 o'clock that evening, 3 women hurriedly arrived at a high-rise apartment building in Pudong. The elevator doors chimed open, and the woman leading the trio adjusted the bag on her shoulder, raising her hand and knocked decisively on an apartment door. The door opened to reveal a British man named Michael Simpson, casually dressed in lounge clothes. Seeing the woman standing at his doorway clearly caught him off guard, even though this woman was none other than his wife, Vivi Fu. Vivi and her 2 friends immediately pushed past Michael, entering the living room. Inside, the apartment was quiet. 2 steaming mugs sat on the coffee table, a woman's handbag tossed on the sofa, and perfume lingering in the air. Vivi scanned the room coldly and shouted at Michael, "Where is she? Tell her to get out here." Her friends joined in, pushing and accusing Michael, escalating the confrontation into chaos. Suddenly, a woman stepped out from the kitchen. Her long hair dripped over her shoulders and a neat apron tied around her waist. "Here she is, she's right here," Vivi's friend shouted, raising her phone to film the confrontation. Clearly, they intended to record and shame the mistress publicly. Upon seeing the woman, Vivi suddenly pulled out a knife from her bag and lunged forward, slicing deeply into the woman's arm. Blood gushed out as the woman screamed and collapsed. Michael rushed to her side, desperately trying to stop the bleeding while shouting frantically, "Call an ambulance!" Seeing Michael protecting this strange woman, Vivi lost all control. While Michael was completely focused on aiding the injured woman, Vivi struck again with ruthless intensity. 2 stabs, then 3, then 4, each blow devastating. One fatal strike plunged into Michael's neck, silencing him instantly. His body crumpled heavily onto the floor, blood gushing and pooling beneath him. Vivi's 2 friends stood in shocked disbelief before finally regaining their senses, quickly restraining Vivi and calling the police. Vivi released the knife and slumped down in exhaustion. When police arrived shortly after, Vivi offered no resistance. This was the beginning of a tragedy. At first glance, it appeared to be a case of marital betrayal leading to murder. A wife discovered her husband with another woman, loses control, and ultimately, blood is spilled and a life lost. The reality, however, was far more complicated. Michael was a fresh-faced executive, newly appointed to a multinational corporation of the United Kingdom. Vivi, on the other hand, was a rising star in a local retail store. When they first met, despite their completely different backgrounds, fate brought their paths together. The year was 2009. Next, one of UK's retail giants cast its ambitious gaze upon the Chinese market. To spearhead this grand venture, they dispatched Michael Simpson, a young executive whose star was undoubtedly on the rise. Barely 30, yet entrusted with the online and in-store operations across the vast expansion of China, Michael was the very embodiment of British charm and polished intellect, painting the perfect portrait of a modern gentleman. In one of Next's bustling stores, a different kind of star was shining. Vivi, in her early 20s, was a whirlwind of vibrant youth and captivating charm. The kind of salesperson who made every customer feel like the only one in the room. Fate, with a sly smile, orchestrated their meeting on a seemingly ordinary day, a routine store visit from the new British executive. Vivi, ever the professional, was tasked with guiding him. With a confident grace, she navigated him through the store's vibrant displays and intricate operations. When she finished, a playful wink danced in her eye as she asked, "Did you understand all that?" Michael confessed, "A little, but the translator filled in the gaps." Vivi feigned a pout, her voice a teasing melody. "Then you'll have to come visit more often." Her casual audacity, her quick wit, sent a genuine laugh rumbling through Michael, a sound rarely heard in the sullen halls of corporate ambition. From that very first encounter, he was utterly captivated, not just by her lively charm, but by the sparkle of humor in her eyes. Her name, Vivi, became a treasured whisper in his mind. Back in the quiet efficiency of his office, Vivi's image lingered. He dived in her performance. A professional curiosity quickly morphed into something more akin to fascination. Her sales figures weren't just good, they were extraordinary. Her customer satisfaction scores soared above the rest. In following training sessions, he found himself instinctively singling her out, eager for her vibrant energy to infuse the team. Her presentations were legendary, a lively blend of insight and entertainment that consistently drew the pearls of laughter from her teammates and from Michael himself. He couldn't deny it. Vivi was unlike anyone he had ever met, a captivating force that was slowly but surely drawing him in. Their professional interaction began to blur, softening into something far more personal. Lunch meetings stretched into dinner invitations. The vast distance that had once separated Michael from this unfamiliar land began to shrink. With her, he started to feel not just comfortable, but something akin to home. And Vivi, in return, transcended her role as a mere salesperson. She quietly, yet confidently stepped into the private world of this charming foreign executive, a world that few others were privy to. It wasn't long before a new profound revelation blossomed between them. Vivi was pregnant. For Michael, the news of an expected child wasn't a burden, but a surge of pure joy. In November 2010, their lives were forever changed with the arrival of their son, Jack. After Jack's birth, they sealed their commitment with a formal wedding ceremony. That day, bathed in the soft glow of celebration, Vivi stood beside Michael, radiant in her white wedding dress, cradling baby Jack in her arms. She was no longer just a working-class girl navigating the bustling city streets. Now, everyone called her Mrs. Simpson, a title she wore with grace and a quite profound triumph. After the wedding, Vivi stepped into a new life. She quit her job and shed her sales uniform and became a full-time stay-at-home mom. Michael's income was more than enough to support the family. They lived in an upscale apartment complex, quiet, secure, and tastefully decorated. Life on the surface was exquisitely comfortable. Vivi's social media became a shimmering tapestry of curated moments. Angelic baby photos, glimpses of designer bags, the soft focus of an afternoon tea with friends. She was the picture-perfect image of a wealthy, elegant housewife, a Cinderella finally finding her forever after. But of course, the story doesn't end here. In truth, the cracks had been forming from the very beginning. From the start, neither family fully approved of the marriage. Vivi's parents felt that Michael hadn't followed the proper customs. He didn't offer a bride price, also known as a betrothal gift. No gold jewelry for Vivi. That's right, in many parts of China, it's the custom for the groom's family to give a substantial cash gift, known as bride price, to the bride's family, both as a gesture of respect and as part of a marriage agreement. In fact, you'd find this custom in many parts of Asia or many parts of the world with ancient history. Anyways, so it was merely ignorance of tradition or something far more stingy, a subtle disrespect for their roots, their history, their culture? Yet with their daughter already carrying his child, what recourse did they have? What could they do but swallow their unspoken disappointment? On the other side, Michael's father, Ian, was concerned too. Never overtly objecting, his words were laced with a quiet British caution that spoke volumes. "It's all a bit rushed," he murmured. "You barely know each other." The most chilling, perhaps, was, "You come from such different worlds," followed by the ominous, "Don't let love blind you." And to be fair, his worries weren't unfounded. Michael's upbringing is that of a typical British middle-class life. His father had worked in senior management at a large firm, and his mother, a devotee of the arts. She had crafted a childhood brimming with intellectual pursuits, shelves overflowing with books, insurance policies, meticulously planned education funds. They gathered to watch soccer. They penned heartfelt Christmas cards. Michael, a model of academic excellence, graduated from a top university with honors and seamlessly slipped into a fiercely competitive role at Nexus headquarters. His path seemingly destined for effortless ascent. Vivi, 5 years his junior, hailed from an entirely different universe. She was born in Nanzhang County, a mountainous rural region in Hubei province that used to be designated to be a provincial-level poverty zone. Her father repaired bicycles by a dusty roadside stall. Her mother worked the farm and pieced together earnings from odd jobs. In a family with 2 children, only one could continue school. Their choice for Vivi's parents was painfully obvious: the son. In many traditional Chinese rural families, boys were often viewed as future breadwinners. Patriarchy in the making. Girls were destined to marry out, their education deemed a wasteful investment. After graduating from middle school, 16-year-old Vivi packed her bags and left home to find work. She did everything to survive. Her teenage years, a blur of waitressing, dishwashing, offering massages, and working in beauty salons. Her singular concern was always how to survive until the next paycheck. It was in those years that something sharpened within her. An instinct, raw and keen, bloomed. She learned to read people quickly, who merely browsed, who had money to spend, who was ready to swipe their credit card. That's how she not only survived, but began to thrive in retail. So when Michael Simpson, the British executive, walked into her store, it's chilling to consider what flickered in her eyes. Perhaps she sensed it immediately. He could be a turning point, or perhaps an escape route. After marriage, there were undoubtedly sweet moments, fleeting glimpses of happiness. But soon, the vast chasm between their fundamentally different values began to collide. As a full-time housewife, Vivi finally felt a breath of air she had never known. No more bosses, no more constant paycheck anxiety. Yet, in this newfound freedom, she seemed to lose her very sense of purpose. Her days dissolved into the endless scrolling of her phone, online shopping, filling the void with new purchases. Their home began to accumulate clutter. Childcare, once a structured routine, became inconsistent. To Michael, she was no longer the vibrant, driven woman he had fallen for. Instead, she reminded him disturbingly of a teenager who had just discovered online shopping, overfilling with wants but devoid of responsibility. The first time he brought her back to UK for Christmas, Michael had hoped she would bond with his family, bridge the gap between their worlds. But throughout the entire trip, Vivi barely looked up from her phone. Her interactions with his relatives were almost non-existent, leaving Michael to navigate the complexity of family dynamics and childcare entirely alone. Afterwards, his father, Ian, a man of quiet observations, remarked, "She's 25, but she acts like she's 16, so self-absorbed." For Michael, who had always cherished family harmony above all else, the moment was a blend of embarrassment and disheartening. A question began to echo in his mind. Did this woman even truly understand what it meant to be part of a family? Over time, something far more disturbing began to emerge. Vivi's mood swings grew more frequently, more volatile, and so did her aggression. The last time he took her home, Ian remembered one detail all too clearly: a distinct mark on Michael's forehead. When pressed, Michael hesitantly admitted the truth. It had come from a fight. Vivi had thrown a plate at him during an argument. Ian fell silent for a long moment, the weight of the confession settling between them. Then Ian said quietly, "Maybe it's time to think seriously about a divorce." In 2013, their daughter Alice was born, but the arrival of a second child seemed only to deepen the gap between them. After Vivi left her job, even the few fragile threads of common grounds they once possessed began to fray and vanish. Michael's world revolved around the intricate dance of corporate strategies, the future-proofing of their children's early childhood education, and the disciplined growth of retirement accounts. Vivi, on the other hand, was more interested in the thrill of shopping mall promotions and the fleeting gossip of her friends. By now, the romantic Michael was long gone. He gave up trying to fix the relationship and instead poured all his energy into their children, consciously, deliberately, ignoring Vivi altogether. She felt invisible, the suffocating weight of his indifference. That indifference drove her mad. Once Alice started kindergarten, Vivi found herself with nothing to do, no one to talk to, and no one to need her. Day after day, her sense of isolation grew, like an insidious tide slowly swallowing her up. Ironically, that empty time could have been an opportunity, a chance to learn English, to bridge the cultural gap that widened daily, to truly reconnect with Michael, or even take up a class, to rediscover the woman she once was. But Vivi didn't choose that path. Instead, she lived like a teenage girl chasing fleeting thrills. She started going out more, partying, drinking, burning through credit cards like there was no tomorrow, forgetting that she was already a mother of two. The rift between Michael and Vivi became non-repairable. In 2015, Michael reached his breaking point and uttered the word divorce. Unsurprisingly, Vivi refused. In her eyes, the endless argument, the suffocating indifference, none of it mattered. She was still, undeniably, the woman with the most enviable life in her circle. Wife of a foreign executive, 2 beautiful children, striking good looks, and the rock-solid facade of stability. Divorce would strip all that carefully constructed world away. She would no longer be the woman who married a foreign elite, but the one who had been dumped by one. The sheer crushing humiliation was unbearable. But this time, Michael stood firm. He suggested a separation. He would provide for her housing, offering generous monthly support, and retaining custody of the children. She could visit them regularly. Vivi reluctantly agreed. For both of them, it was a silent, uneasy truth. Michael had already consulted his lawyer. Under Chinese marriage law, 2 years of separation could be used as grounds to prove irreconcilable differences. He was willing to buy the peace. All he had to do was wait. And when the 2 years were up, he could walk away for good, truly free. But for Vivi, she believed that as long as the divorce papers remained unsigned, he was still her husband. And as long as he was her husband, there was still a chance. Maybe some time apart wasn't a bad thing. Men, after all, often don't realize what they've lost until it's gone. Maybe, just maybe, one day he'd come back. So even after 2 years of their official separation, she never once changed her Facebook name. It still proudly read Vivi Simpson. Her relationship status, unwavering, married. She had no intention of letting go at all. Meanwhile, Michael seemed visibly lighter after the separation. Starting in 2016, his social media transformed into a joyful chronicle of his renewed life with Jack and Alice. Sunny afternoons at the park, thrilling trips to Disneyland, heartwarming family visit to the UK for Christmas. When Jack reached school age, Michael enrolled him in one of Shanghai's top international schools, a testament to his dedication and newfound peace. On Vivi's side, life wasn't so bad either, at least for a while. She didn't have to work, didn't have to attend to the kids full time, and didn't have to deal with Michael's silent treatment. But that fragile illusion of peace for Vivi shattered with brutal force on Monday, March 20th, 2017. Just the day before, Vivi had taken the kids out for a weekend. She even posted a drawing Jack had made to Facebook, tagging it as a heartwarming mother-son moment, a final public performance of a fading normalcy. The next morning, she returned the children to Michael, like any normal Sunday handoff. But as she stepped into the apartment, something caught her eye. A sleek, unfamiliar handbag resting on the living room sofa. Vivi froze. It wasn't hers, and clearly it didn't belong to the kids. It could only mean one thing: another woman. Her name was Rachel Lynn. And ironically, Rachel also worked at Next. With a degree from the UK and a background strikingly similar to Michael's, Rachel shared his worldview, his values, his understanding of the world. She and Michael could talk for hours, a connection he hadn't experienced in years. Over time, Michael developed feelings for Rachel, and with the quiet determination that marked his character, he began to pursue her. He was upfront about his situation, laying out the truth plainly. He'd been separated for 2 years and was in the process of finalizing a divorce. Rachel and Michael made their relationship official around Christmas 2016, a new beginning amidst the old year's ending. By late January 2017, they had moved in together. In Western culture, separation often signifies the practical, emotional end of a marriage. Even without the legal document, both parties are understood to have moved on, emotionally and physically. To Michael, his relationship with Vivi was over. The divorce was merely paperwork, a bureaucratic formality. As far as he was concerned, he was a free man starting a new chapter. What Vivi had heard at the start of 2017, a rumor that Michael might be seeing another woman, someone new, had barely stirred much reaction in her. But seeing that handbag on the couch changed everything. The third party was no longer an abstract. She was real, inside the home, sleeping with her husband. In Vivi's fractured mind, she was attempting to replace her as Mrs. Simpson. Whatever lingering hope Vivi had clung to shattered in that moment. She walked out in a daze, her world tilting on its axis. Vivi instinctively sought out a close friend to confide in. Her friend, upon hearing the story, spat out, "You two aren't even divorced yet. Who does she think she is? She's just a homewrecker." That comment struck Vivi like a lightning bolt. In China, no matter how long a couple has been separated, if the divorce papers aren't signed, they are still legally a married couple. And that made the new woman, in her eyes, nothing but a homewrecker. Vivi felt she was the legal wife, the victim. She had every right to confront Michael and demand compensation. That day, a decision crystallized in Vivi's mind. She would confront Michael that evening after work and deal with the other woman face to face. She even planned to bring 2 of her friends with her to film the mistress being exposed and humiliated, then post it online. A moment of revenge, a public takedown. But what she didn't expect was for Michael to throw himself in front of Rachel to protect her. In that agonizing moment, something within Vivi snapped. The years of frustration, neglect, anger, and humiliation, all of it exploded at once. And that's when the story circled back to the blood-soaked scene we began with. After the attack, police quickly sealed off the building. Downstairs, the pulsing rhythm of red and blue lights painted the drizzling Shanghai night, drawing a small, hushed crowd that gathered to whisper and watch. Upstairs, in their soft beds, Jack and Alice lay fast asleep, utterly unaware that in the span of few minutes, their father lay dead in a pool of blood, and their mother had been led away in handcuffs, consumed by the flashing lights. Not long after, 2 officers quietly entered their room. They gently woke the children, took them by the hand and led them out, one on each side. Small pajama-clad, the little figures guided by strangers. No one explained what happened. No one told them where their father was. They were placed into the back of a police car. Everything was unfamiliar, unsettling. The disorienting dance of the flashing lights outside, the stark, unfamiliar faces of the strangers, the profound, unsettling silence that had abruptly replaced their usual bedtime stories. Their lives had just veered off course permanently. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in his quiet, serene home in the UK, Ian Simpson received a strange, garbled voice message. It was from Rachel. Her tone was frenetic, edged with a raw hysteria that he couldn't quite decipher. The background crackled with an unsettling noise, and somewhere amidst the chaos, he thought he heard Michael's voice, a fleeting phantom. At first, Ian dismissed it. Perhaps they've been drinking. Perhaps it was a joke. Hours later, the phone rang again. It was his other son, Andrew Simpson, his voice tight with an unimaginable grief. Rachel had confirmed it at the hospital. Michael was dead, killed by Vivi. These words hit Ian like a physical blow, stripping the air from his lungs. He and his ex-wife, Linda, rushed to book the next flight to Shanghai. And when they finally saw Michael's cold, lifeless body, their heart broke into 1,000 pieces. Even in that paralyzing moment of grief, one urgent, desperate question cut through the fog of their sorrow. Where were the children? The police delivered the chilling news to Ian and Linda. The day after Michael's murder, the children had been taken nearly 1,000 kilometers away, from Shanghai to Nanzang, the small rural village that barely registered on the map. Vivi's older brother, Guo Jianfu, brought them back to Vivi's old family home. Ian, desperate, tried calling every number he had for the full family, but none of the calls went answered. He resorted to sending messages, postcards, even books, along with a photo album he'd compiled, filled with pictures of Michael growing up. It was his way of helping Jack and Alice remember their father. But none of it reached them. Later, Ian learned the grim truth. The children had never even seen those packages. Jack, once a student in one of Shanghai's top prestigious international schools, now found himself thrust into a local school in rural Hubei. The environment, curriculum, and even language were all alien to him. It was akin to being plucked from an elite prep school on Manhattan's Upper East Side and unceremoniously dropped into a desolate backwater town. But no one in Fu's family seemed to be concerned about that sudden shift and what it might do to the kids. After repeated futile attempts to reconnect, a terrifying realization dawned on Ian. He was being deliberately, systematically cut off from his own grandkids. He couldn't comprehend it. Their daughter had brutally killed his son, and now her family was orchestrating a chilling maneuver to ensure he loses his grandchildren too, severing the last fragile ties to Michael's legacy. Desperate, he consulted a lawyer in China. That's when the brutal truth hit him. Under Chinese law, only the parents possessed the legal right to designate guardians for their children. It was a stark contrast to everything Ian understood. In the UK, or indeed most Western countries, when a parent dies and the other one is incarcerated, children are not simply handed off to relatives. Instead, social welfare agencies, children's services, with their rigorous protocols, immediately intervene. Their sole purpose is to ensure that the children's safety and well-being are taken care of. Grandparents, especially those from the victim side, are almost universally involved in the process and often given serious, compassionate consideration as guardians. But here, in this distant land, a single handwritten authorization from a prison cell was enough to shut Ian out completely. From behind bars, Vivi had penned a letter granting guardianship to her brother and father. That document gave the Fu family full, unquestionable legal control. Ian decided to fight back. He would go to court. He would challenge this injustice. He would gain custody of Jack and Alice. In November 2017, just before Vivi's murder trial was set to begin, a sudden, unexpected communication arrived from the Fu family. They asked Ian for a letter of forgiveness, a calculated plea hoping it might soften the court's judgment, reduce Vivi's sentence. The request was met with a flat, unwavering refusal. Ian was clear. I will never forgive the person who killed my son. In court, Vivi's lawyer tried to argue self-defense, but Ian submitted a forensic report from a British pathologist that told a very different story. Michael had been attacked from behind. He had been stabbed 4 times. One of the wounds severed his right internal jugular vein. Another ruptured his subclavian artery and upper right lung. It was not self-defense. It was an execution. Rachel had also suffered horrific injuries. The 3 major nerves in her upper right arm were completely severed. Her muscle strength languished below grade 3. The damage was permanent, a living testament to the brutal assault. With such overwhelming evidence, Vivi's chance of escaping conviction were nearly zero. The court now faced the chilling possibility of the maximum penalty, death. Meanwhile, the Fu family was staring down a massive compensation order to both Michael's and Rachel's families, a financial burden far beyond what Vivi's elder parents, who earned about £2 a day, could ever hope to pay. Under pressure, the Fu family relented. They agreed to let Ian see the children. In March 2018, nearly a year after Michael's death, Ian finally met Jack and Alice at a hotel in Xiangyang. The meeting was cruelly limited to just 6 hours. But for Ian, even a few hours was a precious gift. What Ian witnessed during that short reunion shattered him in a way he hadn't anticipated. Jack and Alice had been taken from a life of modern comfort in Shanghai into a single shared bedroom with several cousins in a rural home. Little Alice, a young girl, was forced to share her intimate space with older boys in an environment that lacked central heating, reliable plumbing, and even proper bedding. It wasn't just a matter of space. It was the chilling absence of privacy, security, and emotional stability. The contrast wasn't merely material. It was profound cultural, psychological, and developmental shock. And to Ian, it was utterly gut-wrenching and heartbreaking. What stunned Ian even more was the horrifying realization that the children had no idea their father was dead. Their maternal grandparents had spun a tale, a method common enough in rural China that both their parents, they claimed, were simply overseas working. Millions of the so-called left-behind children grew up with this very same narrative. Their parents migrating to big cities for work, leaving them in the care of grandparents or relatives. Some went years without seeing their parents in person. The emotional gaps filled with vague reassurance, fuzzy promises, and often a profound, aching silence. In that cultural context, the Fu's family explanation raised no local red flags. They called it a white lie, a necessity shield. They insisted to protect the children until they were old enough to process the unbearable truth. But to Ian and Andrew, this wasn't protection. It was abandonment by proxy. It was planted the cruelest kind of doubt in young, impressionable minds, that perhaps their father had chosen to leave them, that perhaps he didn't care. Why else he hadn't called? Why else he hadn't come home?
We've got to tell her. Every advisor has told us that the children should be told the truth.
And then, the ultimate cruelty. Ian later learned that Jian Guofu, Vivi's brother, had reportedly whispered to the children, "Your grandparents don't love you. They don't want you. That's why they never came to see you." What's even more horrifying was the realization that Jack and Alice, once raised in an English-speaking home, were starting to forget the language altogether. Ian had bought a treasured copy of The Wind in the Willows, one of Michael's favorite childhood books. Ian opened it, his voice thick with emotion, and began to read aloud to Jack, clinging to the desperate hope of sparkling a connection, of rekindling a memory. But Jack looked at him with blank, uncomprehending eyes. He didn't understand. A few scattered English words slipped from his lips, but not a single full sentence of English. In that moment, Ian realized something terrifying. Michael's presence was fading from his children, not just emotionally, but linguistically. His voice, his story, his very world being erased bit by bit from the minds of his own flesh and blood. Ian, with a desperate tremor, pulled out Michael's old photo album. Jack stared at one picture for a moment. A long quiet time, his eyes red-rimmed with unshed tears. Finally meeting his grandfather's. "Can I stay with you forever?" he whispered. A plea that tore at Ian's very soul. Ian felt his chest tightening, a crushing weight of love and sorrow. After that heart-wrenching meeting, he approached the Fu family with a new offer, a desperate final gambit. He would send the court a formal letter of forgiveness, a shocking concession. He would drop all claims for financial compensation, no matter the cost. And he would even pay an additional £10,000 if only he could bring the children back to the UK, give them a stable home, a proper education, and reclaim their stolen heritage. But the Fu family refused. Ian was told that Vivi, from the confines of her prison cell, clung to a single terrifying fear that once the children leave for Britain, they'd never come back. Not long after, the Fu's family's stance shifted again. Their lawyer reached out to Ian with a message that was shockingly blunt. The children could go, but only under one condition. In addition to signing a formal letter of forgiveness, Ian, the grieving father of the murdered man, would need to pay Fu family £63,000. The lawyer's explanation was delivered with a cold precision. This wasn't a ransom, but a carefully calculated deposit, a guarantee for the children's annual return trips to China, airfare, visa, lodging, living expenses. Ian was stunned. The same family that had flatly rejected a chance to halve their daughter's prison sentence, to potentially spare her years of incarceration, was now standing firm, unwavering, for money. That's when the horrifying truth hit him. In their eyes, custody wasn't about love or emotional well-being or responsibility. It was leverage. A cold, hard bargaining chip with a precise price tag. And the person orchestrating the whole thing? Guo Junfu. From the very beginning, it had all been his meticulous, cruel plan. He had turned the innocent children into human collateral.
They said they'd rather have the money than let their daughter go to prison for life rather than 10 years. And we, Linda and I were at the court, and when it happened, we just couldn't believe it.
Ian was furious. "They killed my son," he told his lawyer, his voice trembling with a barely suppressed rage. "And now I have to pay to get my grandchildren back. How is that not a ransom?" His lawyer, a voice of reason, warned him. If he gave in now, what would stop them from demanding £100,000 next time? Negotiation with the Fu's family had clearly broken down, so Ian turned to the one person he hadn't appealed to directly. Vivi. She was the children's mother. Surely, deep down, despite everything, she wanted what was best for them, didn't she? And the truth was, Vivi knew. She knew her elderly parents were illiterate. They might not mistreat Jack and Alice. No. But they certainly couldn't offer them a real future. The judge overseeing the custody case, in a rare act of personal intervention, even went to visit Vivi in prison. She admitted openly that her kids would have a far better life in UK with Ian. But even then, she refused to give her consent, no matter how many times she was asked. Her answer never changed. Out of options, with a heavy heart, Ian made a painful decision. He would visit Vivi in prison. It was the last thing he wanted to do. The thought of sitting across from the woman who had murdered his son in cold blood made his stomach turn. But for the sake of Jack and Alice, he would swallow his pride. He would go. During the visit, Ian told her everything. How the children had been taken back to the rural Hubei. How devastatingly poor the living and educational conditions truly were. How Alice was being forced to sleep in a cramped room with her older male cousins, stripped of privacy, of comfort, of safety. And then, words that cut deepest, how both children, with their mixed race features, were bullied relentlessly by other children in the village. No one protected them. No one stood up for them. Ian spoke slowly, carefully, holding back tears that threatened to choke him. And then he pleaded with her, not as an enemy, not as the father of her victim, but as a grandfather, a desperate plea for the future of his innocent grandchildren. If they come back to the UK, he said, his voice raw with emotion, each child will have their own room. Alice can take ballet classes. Jack can join Scouts. I'll hire a Mandarin tutor. They won't forget their language, their heritage. I promise, Vivi, they'll visit China every single year. They will see you. He said gently, I'm not trying to take them from you. I just want them to have a future. He didn't blame her. He didn't even ask for an apology for Michael. Vivi remained emotionless, a stone wall against his pleas. She didn't offer a single word of regret. She simply said, with a flat voice devoid of warmth, the kids, I've left that to my family to decide. That was the moment Ian gave up. It drained from him all hope. He walked out of the prison and, with a finality, told his lawyer, no letter of forgiveness. On July the 9th, 2018, the verdict was delivered. Vivi was sentenced to life in prison. She was ordered to pay about £15,000 in compensations to Michael's family and £29,000 to Rachel's. Ian's refusal to cooperate seemed to infuriate the Fu's family, lighting a new, colder menace. Once again, they severed all contact between him and the children, a deliberate act of emotional cruelty. The custody case, which had already dragged on for over a year, reached a bitter deadlock. Desperate, Ian turned to the British Embassy in China for help, but the staff told him regretfully that there was little they could do. In most custody battles in China, Chinese courts tend to maintain the status quo, reluctant to uproot children again, especially if they had already been living with extended family for a significant period. Ian was devastated. The courts had made their stance clear. There would be no imposed decision, no definitive ruling. Their recommendation? That both sides come to a mutual agreement. In other words, compromise. Ian understood what that meant. If he didn't act soon, he might lose his grandchildren forever. He began to seriously consider the unthinkable, buying them back. It felt humiliating, a transactional affront to the love he felt. But what choices did he have? And then, just when he was preparing to make an offer, the Fu family changed the terms again. This time they said he could only take Alice. Jack had to stay. Why? Because they explained when Vivi got out of prison someday, she would need someone to take care of her. Jack, as the eldest son, would fulfill that duty, a burden placed on tiny, unsuspecting shoulders. Ian was speechless. They weren't just planning to tear the siblings apart. They were grooming Jack, a child, to be a living, breathing retirement plan. Angry as he was, Ian knew one thing was absolute certainty. Getting Alice out was already critical, desperate first step. In the end, Ian paid roughly £10,000 in cash for legal guardianship of Alice, along with the right to video call Jack regularly and visit him once a year. The moment they picked Alice up, they left immediately, afraid the Fu family may change their mind again. Sitting in the back of the car, Ian stared out of the window, flawed with guilt. He didn't want to leave Jack behind, not for a second. But he knew this battle wasn't over. Getting Jack back would be the mission of the rest of his life. After Michael's death, Ian had tried countless times to write his son a letter, a final testament of his love and grief. But he could never bring himself to do it, because he hadn't yet brought the children home. But now, on the flight home with Alice sleeping beside him, he finally wrote the first letter he had long carried in his heart. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "Your daughter has your smile. She, like a little star, light up my world." Back in the UK, life slowly began to shift. Alice started speaking English again. She showed a remarkable talent for drawing. And in the quiet solitude of her newfound safety, a subtle joy began to resurface. Every day, she video called her brother through WeChat, a digital lifeline across continents. Ian would often join in, his voice a steady presence, reminding Jack to brush his teeth, encouraging him to start practicing English again, for the day that they would be reunited. Off-screen, tirelessly, Ian and his lawyer continued to work on Jack's case. He knew with very certainty that Fu's family responded to only one thing: money. He proposed a new deal. He would deposit £40,000 into a bank account under Vivi's name. With interest, it would double by the time she got out of prison. That way, she wouldn't have to rely on Jack to take care of her in the future. By that point, Ian had spent at least £100,000 on this custody battle between legal fees, repeated flights, the endless accommodation cost, and the payout to the Fu family. It was nearly his entire pension. In his 70s, he had to return to work, his body weary, but his spirit unyielding, just to keep fighting. He said, "It's incredibly painful to hand over money to the woman who killed my son, but if that's what it takes to take Jack home, to reunite him with his sister, then it's what I have to do." Still, raising £40,000 wasn't easy. One of Ian's neighbors started a crowdfunding called Bring Jack Home. The goal was £10,000. Unfortunately, they hadn't reached it so far. But Ian already knew what they would do the day Jack came back. They would go watch a Sunderland soccer match together, as that was Michael's favorite team. As far as the public knows, All developments ended in 2020. Since then, media has gone silent. Whether Jack ever made it to the UK remains unclear. Judging by Ian's social media, Jack's presence is still missing. Most likely, they haven't reunited. Ian's last Facebook post, dated April 1st, 2023, depicted young Alice sweetly kissing her father. The caption was simply devastating. Would have been 41 today, always loved and missed. That one image said everything. The profound grief this family carries may never fully heal. Looking back, this story has largely been told through the eyes of a grieving father, Ian's eyes, a narrative filtered through his pain and determination. Most reports are based on his interviews, his perspective. From Vivi's side, perhaps there's another story, one the world has never heard. She's behind bars, her voice silenced by concrete and steel. Vivi grew up crushed under a patriarchal family that favored boys over girls, a life where her worth was diminished by her gender. Maybe she was forced to drop out of school and work. From a young age, her dreams withered by necessity. Maybe she suffered from undiagnosed postpartum depression, a silent torment that Michael, in his own world, never noticed. But none of that was the children's fault. What remains hardest to understand, what chills the soul, is this. Vivi knew exactly how limited her family's circumstances were. She knew with absolute certainty what kind of life Jack and Alice would have had elsewhere. The opportunities, the stability, the love that awaited them. And yet, she stood by as they were dragged into the very life she once fought so desperately to escape. There is a traditional Chinese parenting philosophy that true parental love means building the best possible future for your child, even one you might never live to see, even if it means sacrificing your own presence. But Vivi, tragically, chillingly, trained Jack to the same fate she once tried to outrun. The only faint, ironic silver lining in this long and bitter tragedy was that the same male gender preference that once held Vivi back, ironically, it gave her daughter Alice a way out. When Alice video calls her brother, her voice a bright, innocent beacon. She tells him about her new school, her little adventures, her new life. "I'm starting primary school soon," she chirps, her voice full of future dreams. "I wish you were here to help me with my homework." And Jack, his voice, a fragile echo across miles, replies, "I'll come find you one day. But first, I need to find out, Mom." Their innocence is heartbreaking, a sharp, piercing contrast to the brutal reality that engulfs them. But even that delicate veil won't last forever. Alice, after settling into the life in UK, eventually asked Ian, "Did Mom do something nasty to Dad?" Following the delicate advice of experts, Ian asked a trusted friend who speaks Mandarin to gently explain. Her father had passed away. Her mother was in prison. Alice nodded slowly, her young eyes filled with a dawning, terrible comprehension. I understand," she said. As for Jack, he's now nearly 15, standing on the precipice of manhood. And no matter how thick the walls of silence, no matter how carefully constructed the evasions, the truth will reach him soon. He will one day see everything. What happened to his father, what his mother did, and how two families collided with devastating, irreversible force. Some call this story a failed cross-cultural marriage. Others call it a tragedy born of broken families, of profound cultural differences, and of unspoken generational trauma. But from any angle, one undeniable truth is clear. In the end, it's the children who carry the unbearable weight. When the truth finally reaches them, they may feel rage, they may feel lost, they may feel betrayed. Yet, a fierce hope remains. We pray they'll also remember this, that someone fought for them, for their freedom, for their dignity, for their future, and maybe, just maybe, that unwavering love will be the spark that carries them through their deepest darkness, and finally, truly, begin a life that is at last their own.